So I had a long talk with my best friend, Tim, last night. And Tim is one of those guys who is 100% supportive of me and has known the personal mental struggles I've had with the crazy things that have happened in my life. And last night he and I were talking, and we were just going through everything that had happened in my life. And I'd like to give you guys a linear perspective of what happened in my life. And I really don't want you to think this is an ego video. This is just putting this out on the video for documentation, really, because I think it's what we discussed last night really was fascinating. My mother had her master's degree in liturgy. She was head of a liturgical doctrine at her church. But before she did all that, she was planning on becoming a nun. And something happened, and she ended up meeting someone. And instead of becoming a nun, had seven kids. I asked my mom later in life why she became so Catholic, why she was such a spiritual person. Her response was, I became so Catholic because of the out-of-body experience I had during a Mass. She said she remembered being in service, and suddenly she rose up out of her body and she was watching the altar. And she said she looked around, she saw other people up out of their body as well. And so for her, this was a very big spiritual experience in a church. So she had that opening. My mother, when I first started talking about my past life experiences, my mother went to her Catholic priest. And she said, why? She said, I'm worried about my son. He thinks he was an apostle in a past life. And the priest looked around and he leaned in real close and he said, and he was Irish, he said, don't discount it, it might be true. Don't discount it, it might be true. But he didn't want anybody else to hear him say it. He then asked her why she named me John, and she could not, for the life of her, figure out why she named me John. I always thought it was because John F. Kennedy was shot 6 months before I was born. But she said, I have no idea why I named him John. So as an infant, I was named John. And specifically John Davis. The name Davis means son of David, which is what they used to call Jesus. And the name John, the etymology of John is God is a gift of God. And so my name is Gift of God, Son of David, which basically in my mind is talking about Jeshua and his enlightenment, right? My middle name is Charles, which means free man or strength, either one of those two. When I look at the concept of free man, my name becomes Gift of God, free man, Son of David. So I feel like I'm freeing man or freeing people from the guilt and dogma of religion. So that's when I look at my name, I'm kind of fascinated by the etymology of it. When I was a very, very young man, my brother told me a story later in life about having a very high fever, and the family was very worried about me, and they're in the room with me. And suddenly I told them I was on the ceiling looking down at them, and I was taller than all of them. And they described this concept of me being out of body. And they said I was talking to somebody, they didn't know what that was about. And then a little while later, the fever broke and I was fine. So I had this out of body experience. I told a story in one of the videos about the little boy who waited with me until my parents came back. I had multiple imaginary friends. One of them was named Jimmy Garden, and I have no idea what Jimmy Garden was. But I have often wondered whether that was a reference to Gethsemane. But I'm not sure. I've often wondered that. Time goes by. Now I'm a 13-year-old boy, and I'm a painter. I was learning how to paint. I love to paint, and I would hop on my bike and I would ride to the art store and I'd buy new paints to paint with. And at that point I wasn't feeling very loved because my father was not a nice man. I was the one of the 7 kids that he didn't like, and he treated me very poorly. But I would, that my relationship with my father was very strained. But I got to the art store that day, and I walked in, and I grabbed my paints, and I hear the 2 ladies behind the counter. She says, "That young boy is always smiling. That young boy is always smiling." And I was like, so that's so interesting, And I look back at it now, I'm like, no matter what I was going through in my life, I was always smiling. I always had that sensation of being in a place of a smile. Time goes by. My father became very prevalent in my life. He had racist tendencies. He was a drinker. He didn't, he was very judgmental on homosexuality. He was a, redneck, terrible person, in my opinion. And I was going right down that same path. I was thinking and saying horrible things about people and doing horrible, I had bumper stickers on my car that said horrible things. And I often tell the story of when I walked into a convenience store and someone gave me too much change. And then when I returned the change, I had someone say something nice, and I suddenly felt the presence of Jesus before I knew anything about my past life stuff. And I knew it was him. I actually called him my name. Things kept going and kept having more and more interesting experiences. Then I ended up performing in New Orleans. And while in New Orleans, it was the week before I went to New Orleans. They talk about a spiritual awakening coming upon somebody. It was the week before I went to New Orleans. I saw a TV show about 60 minutes, I think it was, and it showed Buddhist monks who were able to put cold, wet towels in their body and go meditate in the freezer. And while in the freezer, actively heat their body up and those towels up enough to be hotter than their physical bodies, hotter than 98.6. So there's now in the freezer wet towels steaming on them. And I thought to myself, I can do that. And so I was in this tent freezing, and I started focusing on the idea of warming my body up. And I naturally did this thing where I started with my feet, and I warmed my body up. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, the one I just did the other day about astral travel and leaving the body and resurrection and all that, I talk about how to leave the body. I did it naturally, trying to warm my body up in New Orleans. And I had what's known as a Kundalini Rising, which basically, when I burst open my crown that night, I, was in that pure white expanse and felt at one with everything. And it was just this gigantic experience, right? And I was like grasping, what was that? What was that experience? And I was struggling with what it was. The next day, I said, well, let's do it again. Let's do it again. So I went into that whole process again. And instead of having that experience, I suddenly heard the tent. I was staying in a tent with my comedy partner. He was out on a date with somebody, and I was in the tent doing this. And I hear the zipper of the tent, and I open my eyes. And as soon as I open my eyes, the first thing I hear is this really loud humming noise. And my comedy partner steps into the tent, and as he steps in the tent, he steps over top of me, and I looked directly at my own face on the other side of the tent. He literally was stepping over top of me, and I was looking at me from out here. I was out of my body. It wasn't very long after that, I was back in my body, a little freaked out, and I turned to my comedy partner, and I was like, I just watched you step in the tent, and I was on the other side looking at my own face. And my comedy partner says, did you hear the humming noise? And I said, yeah. He says, well, you're out of body. Happens to me all the time. He was a long-time transcendental meditator. And he starts talking about how sometimes his alarm clock will go off and he'll forget to take his hand, which I've had that experience now. When you think you're turning off your alarm clock, you realize your arm is not there. It's just your astral arm. So I left New Orleans, and I was in a space of, what is all this stuff that's going on? What is all this stuff that's going on? And my sister, who has been a great beacon on the road to spirituality for me, says, I just read this book I think you'll find interesting, called the Celestine Prophecy. And I got the Celestine Prophecy, and I started reading it. And as I'm reading it, and to me, it was the best kind of book to have because it was an adventure story in Peru. And so it was a fun read as well. And the more I read, the more I started realizing that some of the things they're talking about in this book, I've had these experiences. One of the things was, seeing energy around objects. So like if you step outside, especially, it's really easy, like at dusk when the sun's not way high, but you can actually have it slightly below. So the sky's still blue. Look at the edge of a tree, and you'll notice that the tree will start to glow. You'll start to see energy coming off the trees. And then the more you deal with people, the more you'll start to see around people the energies around them as well. And I told the story the other day in one of the videos about me witnessing the earth kind of burp off a bunch of energy. And that's what it looked like. It looked like there was this big burst of energy that sloughed off. It was like, too much energy here, slough it off. So I started doing that. I became a full-blown vegetarian for a very long time, a couple of years, and was having all kinds of unique experiences just with manipulating energy. So then I was at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, and I met a man I call the biker shaman, and he lived in a teepee, and when you look at him, he looked like a biker. He had a leather jacket, and he was really gross. He always had a mug of coffee in his hand, always. I mean, I would not be surprised if it was surgically grafted to the hand. And he and I just started talking about energy, and then he was showing me about manipulating energy, the Native American ways. And he did this thing which is put your hands out. And he basically created what he called a ball of energy, and he dropped it in my hands. And I could feel it hit my hands, and I felt this energy going up my arms after he hit it. I was like, that's crazy. I was like, that's amazing. And I just went on about my business. Then the next day I was talking to a group of people that I knew, just standing in the campground talking, and suddenly I felt this rush of energy at the back of my body. And I turned around, and he was on the other side of the campground looking at me. He started laughing. And what he's done was created an energy ball and hit me in the back of the head with it, which was really interesting. Understand now, I've never done a drug in my life. These were not drug-induced experiences in any way, shape, or form. So then I ended up in Canada, and I'm in Canada performing at the Renaissance Festival that was up there. It's now gone. And I was staying at a friend's house, and another group was staying there as well. And I'm sitting there in the living room. We're all chatting. But at this point, I'm sitting in the living room, and I'm being totally quiet because what I was doing was watching the energies around people in the room. I was watching that energetic show that I was talking about. I'm watching people, and I'm into it. And suddenly on the other side of the room, this woman starts staring at me. And she walks over and she says, I know what you're doing. You're looking at my aura. And I was like, maybe? Long and short, she was a psychic. Now, I wasn't a big believer in psychics, even though I've been having all these crazy experiences. I was still kind of trapped in my Catholic dogma. We don't believe in psychics or seers, right? But I was intrigued enough to say, let's do another reading. So when she came to Maryland, she gave me another reading. And in the first reading, she said to me, she said, they're telling me that you walked with Jesus. And I was like, yeah, I did that. I knew I had done it. The second she said it, I knew I had done it. I knew it was absolute truth. So I'm like now a little freaked out by this whole thing. I'm like, what? I'm like thinking, am I deluding myself? Am I crazy? What is? Oh my God! What? This is nuts. Why? And I'm like, do I listen to her? Do I go down this rabbit hole and ruin my life? I had all kinds of doubts and fears and anxieties around this. So I decided I was in Annapolis when this happened, in Maryland, and I was heading back to my hometown of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which, interestingly enough, the name Rehoboth was formed as a Christian camp, and basically the whole thing is based around the original town formation was based around Christians at the beach, basically. Interesting. So I decided that I was going to go down, and I invited her to come along because it was just a day trip. So we drove to Delaware, and we went out to Cape Henlopen State Park in Lewis, and we sat down on the beach, and we just started talking, and she's going to give me another reading. Well, suddenly in the reading, her face changed. I mean, it went from being in this state of this to complete and utter bliss. And she starts speaking, and it was her voice, but it wasn't her way of speaking. First thing she said was, John of old, John of new. I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. I'm with you. I've always been with you. I always will be with you. That is why I'm known as, I call my channel John of New, because I'm John of New. I'm John Davis. I'm not John of Old, which was John the Beloved, although I have those memories. And, in essence, I am one with everything, so I am that as well. So as are you. You are also John the Beloved. I just happen to be carrying those memories. All right, so she says, do you see me? And I said, no. She said, open your eyes and see. And it was interesting because my eyes were still closed, but it was like my third eye opened. And I suddenly had this experience of being on a beach, and my face was rising up out of the sand, and I could see sand falling away from my face. And I looked up, and standing here in the sand was these feet. And I looked up again, and standing above me was what I thought of was as Jesus, right? And boom, I was back out. Very strange moment. So I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. This is crazy. And I left. I ended up going off not that long after to Florida. And I went to a holistic fair, and I was walking along the area where the psychics were, just walking by them. I wasn't even stopping. And this woman stops her reading and runs out, grabs me by the arm. She says, they're telling me to tell you you were John the Beloved. And I was blown away because I was not in any way, shape, or form there to get a reading, and nor was I going to. A friend of mine wanted to go, so I went. And then reading after reading after reading after reading, people started just jumping up, asking, hey, you're telling me you're John the Beloved. 19 of them. eventually what happened was I was still going through a massive struggle with it. And I was reading a book called Edgar Cayce on the Millennium, and I found this passage by Edgar Cayce that said John the Beloved will again be named John. And I was floored. I said to somebody, look at that, read that. Does that say what I think that says? And they're like, yep, that's what that says, John. Right? And so I'm like, wow, this is crazy, amazing. Still struggling. I can't, whatever. So then I ended up reading the book called The Messengers about a man who remembered being the Apostle Paul. And as I read the book, I started seeing these synchronicities of the number 444. And I started seeing 444 everywhere. I mean, everywhere. To give you an example of how I started seeing these 444s, I walked into a Best Buy store, and I walked past the appliance section, and I turned around to say something, and every appliance in the row was blinking 444. And it wasn't 4:44 in the afternoon. It was in the morning. This was happening. But every one of them was blinking 444, probably 10, 15 machines, all blinking 444 in my face. So I'm like, okay, is this a sign from the universe? What is this? I ended up getting a reading from a woman her name's Atira Hatton. She's one of the Edgar Cayce Foundation certified psychics. And she verified the life. And she says, I've got some people you need to talk to. And I ended up being introduced to an author of a book and another man who remembered being the Apostle Philip. And they said, well, John, you're supposed to go to Egypt. And they ended up taking me to Egypt. Well, long and short of it, on the Giza Plateau, I had an experience where I had a huge energetic experience and was surrounded by police and local Egyptians. And after the whole thing was done, I had an old man Egyptian man come up to me and he's like, you, my God. He's basically saying, you connected to God, you touched God, is what he was trying to say to me. And I'm having this crazy experience. I leave the plateau and I go back to my hotel. I slept for 21 hours. And I had just woken up because we did this at 9 a.m. This thing happened. And so I had just woken up, went there, had this experience, went back and slept for 21 more hours. Over the next several years, I started having experiences where I would just feel things. I would get these sensations of feeling, and finally I was like, okay, I'm done. I got all this crazy stuff, all these psychics, all these weird experiences with people. I need something scientific to prove what's going on in my life. And I got a regression. And when I had the regression, I was blessed for a couple of things. One of them was my regressionist, Carol Berman, she was a Jewish woman who was very knowledgeable in spirituality. And so she was able to understand things I was saying that I didn't understand what I was saying at the time. So I had my regression, which for those of you who have heard that regression, because it's on the website if you want to get a copy. There's so much in there. It talks about the simplicity of our nature, of our connection to source. It talks about love is everything, and fear is the balance. The things that I talk about now, 30 years later. Well, actually, this is 21 years later. 21 years later. The things that I teach and talk about now are in this regression. It talks about the balance of the masculine and feminine energies, which I totally didn't understand, and you can hear that in a regression. I'm like, I don't know what this means, because this was, in the year 2000. And, I had the vision, I had a conversation in time while under hypnosis with Mary, but not back then. It wasn't a memory. It was here and now. She said to me, because you took care of me then, I'm taking care of you now. So I had that huge experience. I started speaking all over the country, and that first psychic wrote a book about the experience. And that book went out there, and it's an interesting book because it's the story of us meeting from her perspective. And so as I look at this experience and the things that I'm going through, I start speaking all over the country. Then people start asking me for, sessions, healing sessions. Now, I don't in any way, shape, or form think of myself as a healer, and I still to this day do not believe that there are healers. And there are people who can bring people to their faith, who can help them, connect to their own belief that they're healed. And it's not about that person being set aside as a healer. It's about that person being open to assisting in healing. But no healing ever happens without that person taking that belief and holding on to it. And I started seeing miraculous things happen. I saw people step out of wheelchairs, people walk in with two canes and two people helping them, and walk out and accidentally forget their canes and their people. right. Walked her out to her car, and her canes were still up in the upstairs of the building I was in. I've seen a woman show up with an abscess that the whole side of her face was puffed out, and when we spoke, and the saying, when two or more are gathered in my name, basically you're just amplifying possibility. You're amplifying the ability to tap into source by having someone else, doing it with you. But I watched her walk in, obsessed, with an abscess on the side of her face, and she walked out, and her face was no longer swollen. And the people in the room, my assistant at the time, my good friend Holly, and another woman saw this. She came in, and her mouth was partially open because everything was swollen out, and saw this woman come in and saw a complete change. But I'm very aware of the fact that it's the belief. It's the belief in the person being healed that heals them. And you look in the Bible and it says, it's your faith that heals you. It's your faith that heals you. It's your belief. Everyone has the ability. You don't need to pray to Jesus. You don't need to pray to God. You just have to believe. And that's how you achieve, because that's how you ask God. You ask God through your belief, not through the words. You ask God through the belief, because that's what you're creating. So now I'm speaking all over the country, and I'm going around, and I'm talking to the Edgar Cayce Associations for Research and Enlightenment groups all over the country. I spoke in Virginia Beach at the main campus. I spoke at Unity churches, metaphysical centers all over the country, doing these private sessions with people. And the next year we went on another tour, and I was going to these places, and I started seeing the same people coming back with the same issues. And I realized that they would take it in the moment when I was there, but then they would go back and fall into their own patterns. And that I was very quickly becoming their crutch. I was becoming, John's coming back. I have to go take my pill. And, I couldn't morally continue doing it because it's antithetical to everything I was taught. Everything I was taught by Jeshua is that empower the individual, empower the person in front of you, empower. Each one of us has connection to source, and each one of us has the ability to do anything. And we lose faith in ourselves. And so we start putting faith in other things and other people. And it's not the way it works. And I had to stop traveling and stop speaking and stop doing those things because I couldn't allow myself to become a crutch, because it was not the teaching. It was not what was true. It wasn't the truth. And I now, went off and I tried to figure out what I could do. So I took all of my spiritual teachings and I rewrote a script based around corporate work. And I started thinking, well, if I can go into a corporate environment and I can sneak in spiritual principles using their vocabulary, then I could be changing stuff in a very subversive fashion, kind of like sneaking that energy out there. And I did that for quite some time. And every so often somebody would come and say, I know what you're talking about. And it was very unique. It was fun, but it wasn't fulfilling. And the reason it wasn't fulfilling is because I could not be my authentic self. I could not talk about what I knew, talk about the experiences I had. I could not talk about what I was taught openly. And COVID-19 hit. And the corporate work went away, very quickly, because I was a motivational speaker and my job was to go into small rooms with large numbers of people. And it went away. The work was gone. And I loved staying home. I loved being in my home and in my house. And I loved spending more time with my son because I was traveling all the time as a speaker. And I just kept feeling pushed to come back out and do my spiritual work more openly again. And then I met my co-host, Tamara. And within the first time we had a real conversation, I felt compelled to tell her my entire story. Meanwhile, the whole time I'm telling her story, I'm thinking to myself, she's going to think I'm crazy. I'm going back into my own self-doubt pattern. She's going to think I'm crazy. She didn't. She's like, well, what are we doing? How are we doing this? And she was like on it. And I will always love and appreciate her for that, because that was hugely empowering to me. And then, of course, we decided to put together Spirit Cafe. We started talking about Spirit Cafe. And I'm a person who, when something gets in my head, I just do it. I just go get it done. So within like a week, I had Spirit Cafe open and going, and Tamara and I were recording interviews and talking about spiritual topics without filter dogma. I turned red. I'm going red. Hang on, I'm going to fix this really quick here. But boom, without the guilt or dogma of religion. But what's interesting is during Spirit Cafe, I ended up deciding, reaching out to Kim Carey about about coming on and being interviewed. And she came on and was interviewed. And I had the same experience with Kim Carey when we were off the air, where I told her my entire story. And a day or so later, she sent me an email asking if I would be okay to interview on her channel. And she very caringly said, I don't have to reveal my past life, because I told her I didn't want to reveal my past life. I actually told Kim I do not want to reveal this because, it's just not something I want to do. And she asked me to be on her interview. And I literally meditated on it and was basically told that I needed to come back out and come do that work again. And so I built the website, which is a work in progress. It's a basic website that I just started just to have something up. I put up a YouTube channel, the one that you're probably watching right now, And on the day that interview aired, I had 4 people on that as subscribers. I had me, my sister, my friend Holly, and Tamara's owner were the only subscribers to that channel on Thursday when that interview went live. That was a week and a half ago. This morning I woke up and we have 444 subscribers. It's been amazing watching how, coming back to that space, how it's been just amazingly growing. To add to this story, on Friday after the interview with Kim, I got an email that was a reply to an email that I had written 20 years earlier when I was doing the work before. This person emailed me and basically said, is there a way, I feel like I need to talk to you. Is there a way that I can, set up some time to talk? I'll gladly pay you. And I said, well, you can just go to my website and book one of my readings. She says, oh, I didn't know you were doing spiritual work again. She hadn't heard the interview. She emailed me from a message from 20 years before and hadn't heard the interview, didn't know that I was coming back into my work. But the day after I rededicated myself to the work, she emailed me. Now, interestingly enough, she was having a reading from someone in Hawaii, and I think I've told this story already, and the reader told her, you need to talk to John. He's bald, he's got glasses, and he was John the Beloved. And she said, well, I saw him 20 years ago, but I haven't talked to him since. Yeah, he's got a message for you. And in her reading, a message definitely came out for her. So I really do believe coming out right now is divine. I think that coming out and coming back to my authentic self and being open about not only the past life, but the teachings, I think it's the time. And I've talked a lot about the veil getting thinner. I think the response that I've had, I can't tell you how many people have responded to videos saying, God, I knew this, or, I think this, but I've never heard anybody say it, or, I listen to you and it sounds like truth, right? Well, I'm being as authentic as I possibly can, and I'm as real as I possibly can, and I'm saying exactly what I believe, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form changing it for effect. Everything I'm saying is true to my beliefs, it's true to my memories, it's true to my experiences, and the point of all of this is that everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm working towards right now is all about helping you find your own connection to source, because you are the same as Jeshua. You're the same as me. You're the same as everybody around you. We're all just in different points in the same thing. And no one is limited. Everyone has the ability. And it's just a matter of believing it and trusting that God provides it. What does he/she provide? Whatever we ask for. That's what was promised. Whatever you ask in God's name is granted. Nothing will be impossible for you. Take that to heart, because that is the truth. That is the truth. I am a living witness to it. And I wanted to make this video because I wanted you guys to realize a couple things. Some crazy shit has happened in my life, pardon my French. I also wanted you to see my struggles with it, because I struggled with it a lot. And that's what's different this time around, is I am much more open and not struggling. I feel like I'm living the lessons even better than I ever have. And you'll notice that if I'm not at least liking the comments, I'm trying to answer everyone, because I think that's the job. The job is to be available and to communicate. And every so often I'll get one of those people that you can just tell that they're not going to listen to you and they're just going to challenge because that's what they want. I like a good debate. I like a good challenge. But when it's not done respectfully and it's done to put themselves on a pedestal, I don't engage, because it's a waste of my time and your time. I don't, if I see that start up on the comments, I will get rid of the person, because of the fact that one person can poison many. And so that one person goes away. So anyway, I know this is a long video. I know I'm talking quite a lot. And I just really felt compelled to share that this morning, because I think many of us, as we're awakening to our spiritual experiences, struggle with what they are. And I think that hearing someone who has struggled and has come through in a sense of is in a much better place, and seeing how the universe provides once you get very authentic with yourself, then I think that's an empowering thing to teach. And I think you can take that to heart and go out there and create on your own. Have a great day, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.